Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/35th scale German Jagdpanzer E100 krokodil. Unlike many of the other builds which are found on my video listings which belong to a private collector, the model that you see here was built for my own personal collection and is not for sale and or purchase. However, like I often mention in these build videos, I often take on commission build projects from models ranging from 1/35th scale all the way up to 1/6 scale. As for availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. The model that you see here is built mostly out of the box, however, it does feature a couple little small mods that I made to the build, of which I'll be going over in this video. Before I go any further, however, let's go ahead and take a step back to when the models first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit looked like. And here's the model just before the start of the project. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this 1/35th scale plastic Jagdpanzer E100 krokodil kit from Trumpeter. This kit here was purchased off of eBay a few years ago and has been sitting in the stash ever since, which is evident from the crud and dust which is on the box cover. The kit dates back to 2011. At this time, Trumpeter were developing a wide range of these late war German conceptual and prototype vehicles. Many of the vehicles which were released by Trumpeter were based off of plans and diagrams of these various experimental tanks that were floating around for many years. Other vehicles were made up and are completely fictional, and a lot of our creative artistic licensing was exhibited by Trumpeter itself. As for the actual kit inside the box, the kit is an all-plastic model kit. However, the kit does contain a small fret of photo etch parts. This is pretty common with more contemporary releases such as this kit here. As for the box art depicts the krokodil tank destroyer driving down a city street, more than likely Berlin. We have here a small squad of German soldiers armed with a Sturmgewehr, a Volksgewehr, and an MP40. The vehicle is pretty well rendered out in the illustration. As for the rest of the graphic design, is that of your Trumpeter box arts of the period with the standard type of Trumpeter coloring. On the back here we have some CAD drawings showing the photo etch and some close-ups of the details. And on the reverse side, a small little color palette of different options to paint the vehicle. Cracking open the box reveals the kit contents, and as you can see, it's basically a average plastic model kit. Everything is molded in the Trumpeter gray plastic. Now, a lot of the components on this kit here are based off of the E100 tank, super heavy tank kit that was released by Trumpeter around the same time. If anyone is wondering about that model, I actually built two of those vehicles and posted it on my YouTube channel a few years ago, and can be found at the link listed below. As for continuing with the review, this here is one of the runners actually lifted from the E100. The difference for the krokodil kit was that Trumpeter went ahead and omitted the front section for the front side skirts, as the side skirts in the front panel are different due to the shape of the upper hull. Other than that, the pieces are crisply molded and casted and have the type of detailing which one would expect on a contemporary plastic model kit, which, needless to say, is pretty decent. This here is a runner for the suspension. Note the rivets on the road wheels. That runner was also lifted from the E100. Now, this is a runner which is purely for the krokodil. As you can see, it has two front sections which are exclusively for the krokodil, as well as the well and the other gun components. Moving down the box gets us to another runner for suspension pieces. This is again from the E100 and has more of the road wheels and the swing arms for the suspension. Down further takes us to more of the gun components. Now, this is for the krokodil, as it has many of the rear hatch and other fittings required. Moving to the hull, first takes us to the upper hull. It is a all one-piece tub affair. What's nice on these kits is that they do have their fan detailing, which is present on the casting, which is a nice touch. This is also present, by the way, on the E100 release. Here's the lower pan, which is, again, shared by both the E100 and Krokodil kits. Just looks like a extremely long King Tiger lower hull. It's nice that it has its sponsons molded in, which is typically something that is omitted on some model kits. Not so on the Krokodil. Here goes the photo etch. Basically a standard set of PE. This is a nice feature, is that it does save the builder in a little bit of cost and having to purchase one of these from the aftermarket suppliers. Next is the track. The track on this kit here is one piece all vinyl. The track does replicate that of the E100 with the side chutes, which are found on the E100 pattern of track. The tracks, even though are vinyl, have nice detailing represented in the medium that they are molded in, and are a nice plus and will be used on this kit. Going down deeper takes us to a color chart, and then the instruction booklet. From what I remember from the last time I built a Krokodil, the instructions were pretty good and didn't have any surprises with them. Should make for a pretty straightforward kit build. Then, of course, at the very end, a very basic set of German AFE markings. Now that you've seen how the kit started off, let's take a quick walk around the model to get a good look at the model now fully built. This vehicle here, as we know, is the Jagdpanzer E100, also known as the Krokodil. The Krokodil was a fictional vehicle that was a casemate design and was intended to be a heavy tank destroyer, which was based off of the E100 chassis. Now, the E100 itself did exist. A lower hull was in the process of being completed and was actually a rolling chassis. Unfortunately, the war ended before the tank was ever finished. This sole chassis that was fabricated was captured by the Americans, sent off to England for analysis and study. In the 1950s, however, it was taken to a cutting torch and destroyed. The E100 was actually part of a broader new generation of German tank series in which the tanks would have as much standardized parts as possible and would be designated within a certain weight class. This was one problem that the Germans had during the war, was with their older tank designs. Many of them were part specific and had a lot of difficulty with parts interchangeability. This is seen towards the latter half of the war, in which tanks like the King Tiger, Panther, and Tiger I started sharing the same components of the running gear, namely that of the wheels, as well as the engine and transmissions. The E-Series was going to be solely based upon that concept, and the Germans were going to take that to the next step. At the same time the E100 was being built, Porsche was also working on the Mass, which was also discussed in another one of my videos. The E100 was going to be a more practical design compared to the Porsche prototype, which does have a lot of quirks to the design. The E100 was originally going to use the Maybach HL230, which was carried over from the Tiger I, the Panther, and the King Tiger. It was also originally to be propelled by the same transmission found in the King Tiger. However, due to the much heavier weight of the E100, and combined with the fact that the HL230 and the transmission was already underpowered for the previous vehicles, a new engine was going to be developed, and that was going to be a new 1200 horsepower engine from Maybach. The E100 was going to weigh in at around 100 tons, which, needless to say, is absolutely massive of a vehicle. Most of that weight was going to be in the armor, and just like with the Maus, the heavy armor was going to be coupled with that of a very powerful main gun armament. Apparently, a tank destroyer version as well as a flak variant of the E100 was to be designed. However, none of these designs ever came to fruition due to the end of the war. As far as my research goes, I don't believe any drawings or even plans of both of these concepts ever were released and or were possibly ever discovered. With the years that came after the war, a lot of interest came into the vehicles which would have been developed by Germany if the war would have continued. These are known as paper panzers, or also known as Panzer 46s. These vehicles are basically nothing more than artistic drawings and renderings of what these vehicles would have possibly looked like if they were to ever have came off the drawing board or even have developed at all. This was always a niche subject matter in the armor modeling world, and in the past these type of vehicles would be relegated to that of scratch building or maybe even a wrestling kit in the 80s and into the 90s. It wasn't until very recently to when the large plastic model companies started to explore this avenue of armor development in kit form. More than likely, the popularity grew to these type of vehicles with that of the computer games, which have perforated the field within the last few years. Starting with the tank suspension, the running gear and the swing arms that you see here is all 100% stock with no mods that needed to have been made. The kit was very well engineered and was also very well detailed. What's nice about the Trumpeter kit is that it features all of the spring and torsion bar and swing arm detailing, which is found on the inside portion of the hull. All of these details, of course, are lifted from their E100 kit, which was also a nicely engineered kit as well. Now, one change that I did make was that to the sprocket. The only mods that I made to the sprocket was the addition of rough cast texturing, which was added to the bell housing of the actual sprocket itself. It was added to the face as well as the sides. This was really the only mod needed, as the kit sprocket was very smooth in its texturing and its tooling, and the addition of the texture does give it a little bit of an edge. Other than that, the suspension, like I said before, is purely stock. This also includes the idler as well as the track. The vinyl tracks, which were kit supplied, are very nicely rendered for their media and painted, weathered, and installed without any hitches. Moving our way to the rear of the vehicle takes us to first the exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifold is another area which received a few minor tweaks in order to get into the appearance that you see here. Now, one little quirk that for some reason these Trumpeter E100 series has is that on the exhaust manifold covers, the bottom portion is actually solid on the stock kit, which doesn't really make much sense, as on the Panther, the Tiger, and the King Tiger, these are actually, of course, hollow, which would make sense as you don't want water to accumulate in this location over here. On the model, I went ahead and deleted the molded-in floor with that of a Dremel, and this was done to both sides. In addition to that, I also cut in the small little notch that we have right here on the bottom portion of the covers. This is another feature found on German tanks, and on the real German tanks would be used, it was there for use of a tool, a crowbar, to help get this heavy object onto the fasteners and off the fasteners for that of maintenance. This was also added with Dremel and was done to both sides. Another mod that was made was also that of cast texturing, which was absent on the kit. Just like with the sprocket, these portions here on the kit were very smooth and void of any type of texturing. With these mods added, it does also help kick the exhaust manifold up a few notches. As for the other rear detailing, it's basically all stock. The one thing to point out is that of the molded-in tubular taillight. Of course, a quick little swipe of blue paint makes it stand out from the original, and is one of those features that a lot of people neglect to do on their builds, which it's right there in front of you, and with a simple drop of paint really bumps up the accuracy and also will again improve the look compared to leaving it with the overpainted look. Another modification that was made to the rear was that pertaining to the sections of the hull which protrude from the rear wall. On the real German tanks, just like on the King Tiger, these would be used for mounting of the U-hooks and the shackles, which are seen here, which are kit supplied and go on without any problems. The way the kit is designed is that these pieces get glued two sections that are molded into the tank. When you glue these sections on, there will be some seams to contend with. The seams are easily deleted. However, in addition to deleting the seams, I went ahead and with a Dremel, I added the torch cut lines on these sections here. The torch cut lines are a staple found on these type of German tanks with that of the puzzle type assembly. The torch cut lines are present on many of the other components that are found molded into the kit, and adding them to these sections here complete the continuity of the model. Removal of the seams and the addition of the torch cut lines was also required on the two front portions here of the tank, and once added, just like on the rear, greatly help the look and the continuity of the model. Moving to the rest of the upper hull detailing, all of the detailing you see here is purely stock from the Trumpeter kit, with hardly any mods really needed. Starting with the engine deck. The engine deck that you see here is the stock configuration with using the stock components. The kit does have some very nice detailing for all of the features found on the rear end of these E100 series. One thing that's very nice is that of the photo etch grill covers, like I mentioned earlier in the unboxing portion. With these grill covers supplied with the kit, it is one less component that the builders you need to acquire from an aftermarket source. The detailing present underneath the grills are also nicely rendered, and as you can see on this build here, by painting these pieces in red primer and weathering them, makes them stick out of the grill covers rather than just having them yellow where everything would just blend in. Moving to the rear of the case-made hut takes us to the large rear doors. Now this is one portion of the kit which did require a little bit of hand fitting from me in order to get the pieces to fit on in the way you see it here. This was done with the aid of a needle file, and with the removal of some material in certain spots, the doors went on as the way you see it on the built model. Moving from the doors takes us to the antenna base. The antenna base is your typical German AFV antenna base and is kit supplied. Now the kit does have a small little plastic nub which is molded into the antenna base. The nub was broken off and I replaced it with that of a metal wire. Just like on all my German builds, the section where the wire meets the antenna base is painted in brass or gold, which gives you the feature which is found on these German tanks, as like I often mention, this portion would be brass. Moving our way to the upper HUD detailing, this is all stock with no mods needing to have been made. Now I've seen several versions of the krokodil, namely that of artist conceptual drawings, in which there's a mini turret located in this section here. Trumpeter did not go with that route. Instead, they went with a German late pattern copula. More than likely, this was done to avoid any sort of copyright infringements which may have been floating around, as again, this vehicle here is purely fictional. As for the Commander's copula, it is very nicely detailed for the scale. It has all of its periscope detailing present, which has all been painted in gloss black, as I often do on these builds. The copula also has an anti-aircraft MG34T machine gun. This is the kit original piece, and the kit MG34T is nicely rendered. Now, one mod that I made to the MG34, as I often do on these builds, is I drilled out the muzzle end with a very fine drill bit. Now, also, like I frequently mention, this should only be done by someone that has the expertise as well as the tooling involved to do such a procedure. As with something this tiny, there is very little room for error, and you can easily botch up and screw up the machine gun by doing this procedure if it goes wrong. As for the remainder of the detailing, again, it's all pretty much simplistic and based off of the other German heavy tank details of the period, namely that of the mouse pattern top ventilators. All of the periscopes are painted with gloss black, just like on the copula. On the side portions of the hut, we have here small little clamps. These clamps here are for the little crane that is supplied with the kit. Now, the kit does supply you with components for that of spare track mounting equipment, similar to what's found on King Tigers, as well was actually used on the Trumpeter version of the E100. On this kit here, they're not utilized. However, since this vehicle is purely fictional, I don't see why you can't go ahead and add these components yourself. However, for this build here, I just went with the stock out-of-the-box configuration. The crane is not glued on and can be positioned to any of these locations found on the side of the hut. Moving our way to the mantlet. The mantlet does have some nice cast texturing present, and it's found on both the mantlet as well as the mantlet tub. Now, when you assemble this kit, there will be a seam that you must contend with on the back portion here. This was done with the same type of cast texturing that I used on the sprocket, as well as the exhaust, which were mentioned earlier. Once everything is blended in, it is no longer visible, or is it any sort of an eyesore. Now, the gun can go up and down, as well as side to side, which is common on many casemate model kits in 1/35 scale and larger. The muzzle brake is also the kit original one and was nicely done with that of slide molding type features. The perforations found on the brake are all molded into the piece, which is definitely an improvement from the tooling from back in the 90s with the Dragon E100. One trick that I did do was that because the way the pieces are molded, the holes are going to be all in actually one direction. And to improve it with a Dremel with a bit the same exact size of the ones that are molded in, I carefully went ahead and drilled out each of the holes again, making all of the holes in a vertical format as opposed to a horizontal format. By doing this procedure, this also helps the look of the muzzle compared to just leaving it stock. Moving our way to the side skirts. The side skirts that you see on this tank here are, again, the kit originals, and if you notice, have all been mounted on this model. Now, one thing that's unique about not only this version, but the Trumpeter E100, is that you can build the tank with the option of leaving the side skirt panels off, which can make for a different rendition or a different visual look of the model compared to its stock completed status that you see here. Moving our way to paint and markings. The markings that you see on this tank here are the kit original decals, which were kit supplied. Like I shown in the unboxing portion, the kit does contain a strip of decals which contain that of crosses as well as some numbers. For the build here, I only utilized the 2 crosses that came with the set. The numbers were not utilized, as by this point of the war, numbers on the side of these German tanks were really a thing of the past. As for the quality of the markings, the decals are very nicely done and went on without any problems for both installation, lacquering, as well as even weathering. As for the tank's camouflage pattern, the camo on this tank is much different compared to the other builds which are posted on the channel that I built in the past. Rather than an organic style blotch pattern, I went with a splinter pattern. The difference between the two is that a blotch pattern has more of a organic shape to the blotches, and the blotches are applied on with an airbrush, which means they have a nice soft edges to them, as opposed to a splinter, which is the opposite. The splinter pattern features more jagged style appearance, and the edges are very sharp as opposed to the soft edge done with the airbrush. Now, because these vehicles are purely fiction, this offers the model builder a wide variety of artistic licensing in order to get the look that he's going for. Now, the splinter pattern is not fiction. They were utilized by the Germans towards the mid and latter half of the war. Also, if we notice, what's interesting about the pattern is that I didn't add the stripes to the engine deck as well as the roof. This was another feature found on several late pattern German tanks, namely that I've seen this done on Panthers as well as I believe a King Tiger or 2. By doing this, this helps break up the look of the vehicle compared to just having the pattern zigzag all throughout the entire tank. Another thing you'll notice is that the barrel, I went ahead and left it with the gray primer, as like I mentioned in the other E100 video and several of the other smaller scale videos that I have, the barrels were swapped in field, and because of that, many times they were left in their primer color. If we also notice on the muzzle end, I went ahead and left it with the Dunkelgelb, as these pieces, of course, are not attached to the barrel and can thread on and thread off, and for all I know, this muzzle brake could possibly came off of another gun or possibly a damaged vehicle. Finally, what was another feature that I built into this tank is that the entire lower hull is left in primer red. Not only is the primer red found on the lower hull, but also on their sponsons, as well as even on the sections of the hull that are covered by the side skirts. On the corner, you'll see the tank before final wrap up, in which I was mounting on the side skirts. You can see what the tank looked like with the pieces off. Like I said before, this vehicle can be built with the side skirts in the off state, which if I would have done that, you could see another different variation of the same vehicle. In addition to those sections, I also left the inner portions of the row wheels on the inner and outer sections with the red primer as well. Overall, I'm very happy with the way the model turned out. It came out better than I first originally anticipated. Now, it's also interesting to point out that this is not my first go-ahead at one of these Trumpeter E100 Jagdpanzer kits. The first one I built was done a number of years ago, and that build was actually done for private commission and belongs to a private collector. Unfortunately, at the time that model was built, I wasn't doing these smaller scale model showcase videos that I've been doing within the last few years. However, that build is posted on the eastcoastarmory.com website, and a few pictures can be seen on the corners of your viewer right now. That build utilized several of the mods and tricks that I incorporated into this build over here, but one thing that separates two was that the commissioner wanted to swap out the gun from the kit original with use of a different caliber gun from an aftermarket source. In addition to this Jagdpanzer E100, I also went ahead and built the other Trumpeter standard E100 super heavy tank kit. Now, this build here is another build that is actually posted on the ECA channel. In fact, that video, it contains another E100 build that was also built for private commission. It's nice to have the two models finally built and side by side, as both of them look nice in the collection. As a skill level and recommendation, this kit here can definitely be built by someone with an intermediate to an advanced range. However, a beginner can possibly assemble one of these kits. The kit itself is extremely straightforward and assembles very easily and very quickly. One area to point out where a beginner may have problems is that of the rear engine deck. The rear engine deck on all these King Tiger type of vehicles has a lot of small little hooks and other little widgets and gizmos which can easily be broken or lost by the builder. So something like this really needs to be done by someone who can take their time and carefully glue on the parts and make sure they're on strong enough so that they don't fall off either from painting or even from just general handling. However, with that out of the way, since the tank does have simple vinyl tracks, yeah, a beginner can possibly assemble one of these kits. However, I don't recommend it as a model builder who's straight out of the gate. If anything, maybe one or two kits under your belt, and then you could level up to something like this. I recommend this kit for anyone who's a fan of World War II German armor, as well as fans of late war German tanks, and also the type of people who like to build prototype and conceptual models as well. The same type of crowd that enjoys the T-28 Super Heavy Tank, or even such vehicles as the Mouse and the standard E100 like I have here. All of which would enjoy adding this build to their collection. And that concludes this model showcase video for this 1/35th scale Jagdpanzer E100 Krokodil. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, where there are more photographs of this particular build that are posted, as well as all the other smaller scale builds and 1/6 scale builds for that matter, posted on the Facebook page as well. Also, don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale build and detail components. Thanks for watching.